Well, I told you I didn't have an image, but now I do.
Now you do.
So when you said river, I thought tree.
Oh,
It just happened that
oh.
instinctually. So maybe it's because I maybe see myself as wanting to be a tree with roots that go down to be nourished, and that's what gives you flexibility. So it's a lifelong process of growing roots. And someone told me this, and I'll take it as true. I don't know it. That roots grow in the wintertime. That's when they really are nurtured. So that part of it is just perseverance, just sort of trying to be there. And then going with that is this whole symbol of the tree of life, which I haven't done extensive research on it, but it's apparently a symbol that's used in many cultures and many religious traditions. But then the various cultures and religious traditions also take that symbol in a distinctive way. So for Jews, the tree of life is the wisdom of Torah. And for Christians, of course, it's sort of that, plus we think of the cross as the tree of life, but particularly I like the text in the book of Revelation where the tree, the leaves of the tree of life are for the healing of the nations. And I do think that, I mean, I don't fundamentally understand myself as a healer, but this notion that our work ultimately is for the healing of the nations. And then if I could, kind of a humorous sort of play on the river. Again, when you said river, I didn't think Hudson, I thought the Columbia River, which is the mighty river between Washington State and Oregon. And I've spent a fair amount of time down there. And there's a wonderful spot quite close to the mouth of the Columbia River, which is 5 miles wide at that point, called Dismal Niche. Dismal Niche. And that's where Lewis and Clark were trapped in October one year. The weather was so lousy, they couldn't go. This was where they ended their trip across the country, and they were trapped in this dismal niche. And it's just a little kind of spot to pull off the road now, but I'm thinking, you know, part of our work is being with people when they get in dismal niches. And being mindful of when we get in those ourselves, and remembering what that's like. So those are my sort of plays on trees. And one of the things that trees do, that they shelter you in times of, you know, when the downpour happens.
Dismal niches.
That's it. Yeah, it provides you with a niche. So.
And does that connect to your recent passion and scholarship around the cross that you've been working on?
Yes, yes, I'm trying to finish a book on the passion and death of Jesus, and my last chapter is called The Tree of Life, so yes, I'm trying to redeem the symbol, but the roots really do have to do, in large measure, with trying to plumb the depths of my own religious tradition, which is Catholic Christianity, because I think the roots are very profound. The problem is more what happens at the surface level. And so to be part of this, you know, ancient community of faith that's been in so many has been expressed in so many different cultures over time, and I find that, and it's a great challenge because you go back to the 15th century and you say, how do I use this for today? But it's a sense of being part of a community over time and space, very, very large. You know, as James Joyce says, here comes everybody.
It's a great image, though, of the roots growing in the winter. I mean, I think sometimes
you grew up on a farm, is it true?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just think it's interesting to even think of the roots still growing, because I think sometimes we think of the roots down there and they're holding the tree up, but they're not growing anymore, that somehow it's just everything is happening above ground. But I mean, to think of our traditions themselves even growing and changing and going in new directions rather than just being sort of stationary.
I mean, I pulled a plant out the other day at my house where I thought, why isn't this growing? It wasn't dying, just wasn't growing. Well, the roots were all, you know, it had to get a bigger pot. And I think that's the church gets stuck. It's the same old problem.
Well, I think that
That's a wonderful
Troy needs a bigger pot.
Stir it up.
Stir it up, but
That's right.
It's interesting, you know, I think in all of us, what would be our theology of ministry is formed in conversation with some other people, whether it's the roots of another tradition, the ebb and flow of a river, a yes and, you know, in my own sense, it's, so I was thinking about this question, Sue, a little bit. What is my theology of ministry? You know, I don't think I can ever even define my theology of ministry.
Well, that's not what you're supposed to say for this video.
Well, I think because really my ministry is always alongside other people.
Oh, so
And
did you say our theology of ministry?
well, I think it's a moving target because it really my ministry here in this semester is a little different than it would be in another time and place when it is, you know, downtown or 10 years ago or what it might be in the future. I think it's hard for me to say what my theology of ministry is, because I think my theology of ministry is really something that's shaped with you all, really. I think it's something that we come up with.
It's it just seems to me that the minute that you've said that tells me something anyway, Troy, about your theology. I mean, it tells me that you see it as a corporate act somehow, that it isn't only you sitting in your room thinking great thoughts and writing books all by yourself. I mean, that would be a different kind of theology, I think. Maybe it's the word that's tripping us up, but I mean, I think you indeed do have a way of thinking about other people, about yourself, about God, and that somehow forms your theology. It doesn't mean it would never change, and it doesn't mean you're not doing it in conversation with all of us here, but...
So maybe it's something like, what are the ingredients when we reflect on why we do what we do? What do we think about, you know?
Back to the cauldron.
That's good. And even the question of how does that change over time? Because I think one of the other things about, you know, the word theology, it's this notion that things are cast in stone and that's how it's going to be forever and always. But I think that there are different things that are significant to us. There are different things that drive and motivate us throughout our lives. And as those things shift and change, then our theology, our perspective, the way that we feel called to express, you know, our drive, you know, urge toward ministry changes. I think it changes every day.
Well,
I feel like
at
saying
the
this all
same
the time.
Yes, at the same time, I think if you look back on all the manifestations, I bet there is a core that runs through that does not change. I mean, I'm putting it out there. That's certainly my experience of myself. I've had many different jobs. No one can say what I'm going to do next. I mean, you know, over the span of my adult life, one from the other, it can't be different, more different than the other. At the same time, when I look back, there is an absolute clarity about what it is, that core. And for me, it's about nurture and hospitality. That's been every position I've taken was about that. And that's when I reflect back, so that's where my theology lies. And that's, so the manifestation changes, and maybe even how I understand that might change. But I think that is at the core of everything I do. And so that's what I agree with you, but I wonder if that is that something that you resonate with? Or?
Well, I mean, I think, and I've seen that in you, so I'm trying to think, you know, what are there words that sort of were given to me that I think I hold, I mean, I maybe don't think of them explicitly very often, but so I belong to a religious community that talks about educating in faith for the full development of the human person, which I would call the flourishing of people. And I do find that really meaningful, that, you know, we're trying to help creation flourish. And, you know, you know, I'm a small little part of that huge task. I mean, it kind of goes back to Genesis and being created in the image and likeness of God, but this wanting to bring out of people their gifts, and sometimes that calls for really setting notice that, you know, you could do better with this. You know, that. I'm very impatient sometimes when people don't study, or, you know, they're really lazy about it. It's like, no, you have to know something. You have to be able to do things, and you need to do them well. That's part of what I think Union stands for.
Is that different, what you're speaking out of, or at least what you just said, sounds to me more like your position, your place as an educator, as that being like
Right,
an expression
that's
of
what
you
my
think
that's what
your
my
ministry.
lifelong ministry has been. You know, unlike Sue, who's done many different things, my whole life has been in schools. So yeah, but I suppose if I worked in a local congregation, I would express that differently. But the point is that persons are multifaceted.
Yes.
So working for the full development of persons means that you have to bring, you know, so that like collectively, we all I think are trying to do that kind of thing, but I don't have Troy's gifts and education. So I can't be Troy. I can only be Mary. And what I loved about what Troy just said though, I'm able to be Mary because I have Troy and Sue and Janet and Barbara and Sam and Ann, and so collective, and then the rest of my faculty colleagues. And I keep coming back in my own thinking to the image of the body of Christ from Paul.